The man leaning against the Harley-Davidson was everything the 1970s biker culture represented. 6'3", 240 pounds of weathered muscle, leather vest over a bare chest, arms covered in faded tattoos from Vietnam. His name was Vincent "Razor" Kane, and everyone in Riverside County knew to stay out of his way. Riverside, California, Joe's Motorcycle Repair, August 9th, 1975. Saturday afternoon, 2:15 p.m. The shop sat on a dusty stretch of Route 91, surrounded by desert scrub and heat shimmer. It was the kind of place where serious riders brought their machines, not weekend hobbyists, but people who lived on two wheels. The air smelled like motor oil, gasoline, and sun-baked asphalt. Inside the open garage bay, 3 bikes sat in various stages of repair. Outside, in the dirt parking lot, approximately 15 motorcycles were lined up in precise formation. They all belonged to the same club, the Iron Cross MC, not an official 1%er club, but close enough. They wore the patches, they had the reputation, and they had Vincent "Razor" Kane. Razor had founded the club in 1968 after his second tour in Vietnam. He came back with scars, skills, and a barely contained rage that found its outlet in motorcycle culture. He wasn't the biggest biker in California, he wasn't the meanest, but he had something else: presence. When Razor walked into a bar, people moved. When his club rode through town, traffic stopped. Respect through intimidation, that was the code. On this particular Saturday, the Iron Cross had stopped at Joe's for routine maintenance. One of their members had a clutch problem. Joe, the owner, was in his 60s, a former racer himself who understood the unwritten rules. Fix the bikes, keep your mouth shut, don't make eye contact unless spoken to. Razor sat outside in the shade of the garage overhang, drinking a beer from the cooler they'd brought. His club members lounged around him, 8 men, all cut from similar cloth, leather, denim, chains, boots, the uniform of their tribe. They'd been there about an hour when a light blue Datsun 240Z pulled into the lot. Clean, well-maintained, not flashy, but clearly cared for. The kind of car that suggested its owner had taste and money, but not necessarily the kind that came from working with their hands. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Average height, lean build, wearing dark jeans and a simple white t-shirt. His hair was neat, his posture relaxed. He walked toward the garage with the kind of easy movement that suggested confidence without aggression. What happened in the next 12 minutes would become the story Razor's club members would tell for the next 30 years, but never in public. Joe looked up from the bike he was working on, saw the newcomer, and his expression shifted. Recognition, maybe concern. He wiped his hands on a rag and walked over. "Chuck, didn't expect you today." "Carb's running lean. Thought you could take a look." Sure. Pull it around back. I'll get to it after I finish with this clutch." Chuck nodded and started back toward his car. That's when Razor's voice cut across the lot. "Hey!" Chuck stopped, turned, looked at the source of the voice. Razor was standing now, beer still in hand, his body language loose but alert. His club members had gone quiet, watching. This was how it started sometimes, Razor testing someone, establishing hierarchy, reminding everyone who controlled the space. "Yeah?" Chuck's tone was neutral, polite. "Nice car." Razor's voice carried that particular edge, not quite hostile, but with an undercurrent of mockery. "What do you do? Dentist? Real estate?" "I teach martial arts." This got a laugh from a couple of the bikers. One of them, a thick-necked man with a beard down to his chest, called out, "Karate Kid shit, huh?" Chuck didn't react, just waited. Razor walked closer, closing the distance to about 10 feet. "Martial arts, like in the movies, Bruce Lee stuff. Something like that. You make movies?" "Some stunt work, some acting." Razor smiled and wasn't friendly. "Hollywood guy, that explains the car, the clean clothes." He looked back at his club members. "We got ourselves a movie star." More laughter, but it had an edge now. Pack behavior, group reinforcement. Joe stepped forward. "Razor, come on, Chuck's good people. He's just here for—" "I'm just making conversation, Joe." Razor's eyes never left Chuck. "No harm in that, right?" "Right," Chuck said quietly. "See, the thing is," Razor continued, moving a bit closer, I got a problem with Hollywood types. They come out here to the real world, think they understand it because they played tough guys on a soundstage. But that's all pretend, choreography, stunt coordinators, safety pads. Chuck's expression remained unchanged. No anger, no fear, just attention. Out here, on this road, in these desert towns, this is real. When we fight, ain't no director yelling cut. When we go down,
Joe would later say this was the moment he knew something bad was about to happen, not because Chuck looked worried, but because he didn't. Chuck's breathing hadn't changed, his stance hadn't shifted, his hands remained at his sides, relaxed. But anyone paying close attention would notice his weight had centered. His feet had adjusted, almost imperceptibly, into a position that offered perfect balance. "You're testing me," Chuck said calmly. "Maybe. Maybe I'm just talking, making observations. You want to see if I'm what you think I am." Razor grinned. "Smart guy. Yeah, I do. Because guys like you, Hollywood guys, you come to our world, you ride through our towns, you think you understand us because you played a biker in some film. But you don't. You're tourists, and tourists don't belong here." "I'm not trying to belong anywhere, just getting my car fixed." "See, but that's the problem. You're in my space now. This shop, this lot, everyone here knows this is Iron Cross territory. You rolled in without asking permission, without showing respect." Chuck absorbed this. "I didn't know that was required." "It is now." The other club members were standing now too, not threatening, not moving in, just present, a silent wall of leather and muscle. This was pack psychology, group intimidation. Razor was the alpha, but the pack gave him power. Joe tried again. "Razor, Chuck's been coming here for years, long before your club ever—" "Joe," Razor's voice was flat, "this doesn't concern you." Joe looked at Chuck, worried. Chuck gave a small shake of his head. "It's okay." Razor cracked his knuckles. The sound was deliberate. "So here's what's gonna happen, Hollywood. You and me, we're gonna step over there." He gestured toward an empty section of the lot. "And we're gonna have a conversation, physical conversation, just to see what you're made of. Nothing serious, just testing. And if I say no, then you're gonna get back in your nice clean car and never come back to this shop. Because this is Iron Cross territory now, and we don't welcome people who disrespect us." Chuck looked at Joe. "That true? This your territory now?" Joe's face was conflicted. "Chuck, they've been—" "Answer him, Joe." Razor's voice had steel in it. Joe sighed. "I do business with everyone. But yeah, Iron Cross is here a lot. It's complicated." Chuck understood. Joe was caught between his regular customers and the reality of dealing with a motorcycle club that could make his life difficult. This wasn't about right or wrong. It was about power dynamics in a small community. Chuck looked back at Razor. All right, what? I'll step over there with you. Have your conversation." Razor's grin widened. "Now we're talking. See, boys, Hollywood's got some spine after all." The club members formed a loose circle around the designated area. It was maybe 20 feet across, dirt and gravel, with the desert sun beating down. No shade, no escape routes, just two men and heat and tension. Razor pulled off his leather vest, handed it to one of his men. Underneath, his torso was scarred and muscled. This wasn't gym muscle. This was functional strength, built from years of physical labor and real violence. His arms bore faded tattoos, military unit insignia, a skull, a knife wrapped in barbed wire. Chuck didn't remove anything, just walked to the center of the space and stopped. Razor circled slowly, sizing him up. The size difference. What Vincent Razor Kane would learn in the next 90 seconds would fundamentally alter his understanding of what made someone dangerous. Razor threw the first punch, not a wild haymaker, a proper jab-cross combination. He'd had some boxing training in the military, knew basics. The punches were heavy, committed, thrown with bad intentions. Chuck's upper body shifted, minimal movement. The jab passed by his cheek, maybe 2 inches of clearance. The cross traveled through space where Chuck had been but no longer was. Razor's momentum carried him forward slightly, and as he passed, Chuck's hand touched his shoulder, not a strike, just a light contact that redirected Razor's movement by another few inches. Razor stumbled slightly, caught himself, spun back. Lucky! He came in again, this time a low kick aimed at Chuck's leg, followed by an overhand right. The kick was hard, committed. Chuck checked it with his shin. The impact made a sharp crack, bone on bone. Razor's leg went slightly numb from the collision. Before he could process that sensation, Chuck had moved inside his overhand and was standing in a position where Razor's punch couldn't reach him. Chuck's elbow rose, not fast, not aggressive, just there, and stopped an inch from Razor's jaw, a point made without contact. I could have, I didn't. Razor backed up, shaking his head. His leg was still tingling from the check. His pride was starting to sting worse. Stop playing around. I'm not playing. Then hit me for real. Why? The question stopped Razor cold. What? Why do you want me to hit you? What does that prove? That you're not just some Hollywood fake, that you can actually— I can, Chuck said simply, but I don't need to prove it to you. This enraged Razor. He charged, full commitment. This wasn't technique anymore. This was a 240-pound man using his mass and momentum to overwhelm a smaller opponent. The strategy had worked in dozens of bar fights, hundreds of confrontations. When you're bigger and meaner, you simply impose your will. Chuck stood his ground, and then, at the last possible moment, he moved. His right foot stepped forward and slightly left. His body turned. His hands made contact with Razor's charging form, one on the shoulder, one on the hip. Not pushing, not blocking, redirecting. Razor's own momentum betrayed him. He found himself suddenly off balance, moving in a direction he hadn't chosen. His feet left the ground. Time seemed to slow. He was aware of the sky rotating, the dirt coming up, and then impact. He hit the ground hard, flat on his back. The air exploded from his lungs. Dust puffed up around him. Complete silence. 15 bikers stood frozen, watching their president, the toughest, most feared man in their club, lying on the ground, staring at the sky, trying to breathe. Chuck stood a few feet away, hands back at his sides, breathing normally, waiting. Razor gasped. His diaphragm had spasmed from the impact. He couldn't draw breath. Panic started to creep in, that primal fear of suffocation. His hands clawed at the dirt. His mouth opened and closed like a fish. Then his breath returned, a ragged, desperate inhale, then another. His lungs remembered how to work. One of his club members started forward. "Razor!" "Don't!" Razor's voice was hoarse. He rolled onto his side, pushed himself up to his knees, stayed there for a moment. The dust stuck to his sweat-covered skin. His back ached from the impact. But worse than the physical pain was the psychological reality. He had just been put on the ground by someone 70 pounds lighter in front of his entire club.
But what happened next surprised everyone, including Chuck Norris. Razor stood up slowly. His pride was demolished. His reputation as the baddest man in the room was crumbling. By all the rules of biker culture, he should attack again, should escalate, should do whatever it took to reclaim dominance. Instead, he laughed. It started as a chuckle, then became a full belly laugh, not hysterical, not manic, just genuine, the laugh of a man who had just learned something unexpected about himself. His club members looked at each other, confused. This wasn't the script. This wasn't how Razor handled defeat. "God damn," Razor said, still catching his breath. "God damn, Hollywood, you put me on my ass." Chuck didn't respond, just watched. "No, seriously." Razor walked closer, but his body language was different now, less predatory, more curious. "What was that? How'd you do that?"
Used your momentum, your own force. I've been in 100 fights, had my share of scraps in Nam, done time where you fight just to survive another day, and nobody's ever done that to me. Most people fight force with force, try to overpower. I learned different approaches. Razor studied Chuck with new eyes. You weren't even breathing hard. Didn't need to. You did the work. This got another laugh from Razor. I did, didn't I? Charged in like an idiot, made it easy for you. You committed. That's not idiotic, just predictable. Predictable, Razor rolled the word around. Is that what I am? Predictable. Most people are. We fall into patterns. Those patterns can be read. Razor turned to his club members. Y'all see that? He dropped me without breaking a sweat. I weigh him by what, 60, 70 pounds? One of the bikers, a younger guy with nervous energy, spoke up. Razor, you want us to what? Jump him? All of us? Razor shook his head. Nah, that ain't how this works. I challenged him, one-on-one. I lost, fair and square. He turned back to Chuck. What's your real name? Chuck Norris. Recognition flickered across Razor's face. Wait, Chuck Norris, you're that karate champion, the one who won all those tournaments. Was, years ago. And the movies? You really do that? Some, more recently. Razor nodded slowly, processing. So when I called you a Hollywood fake, you didn't know. Most people don't. But you let me think it, let me talk all that shit. Why? Chuck shrugged. What you thought about me was your business. Correcting you wouldn't have changed anything. Because I needed to see it myself. Something like that.
Joe, the shop owner, would later say this conversation changed the entire dynamic of Riverside County's biker scene, but not in the way anyone expected. Razor extended his hand. After a moment, Chuck took it. The handshake was firm, respectful. I owe you an apology, Razor said. I came at you with attitude, disrespected you, assumed things that weren't true. Apology accepted. But I got questions, a lot of them, because what you just did, that wasn't normal fighting, that was something else. It's called Aikido, Jiu-Jitsu, several systems that focus on using an opponent's force against them. Could you teach that? Chuck considered this. To who? To me, to my guys. We know how to brawl, we know how to hurt people, but what you did, that's different, that's control, he searched for the word, that's art, martial art. Yeah, that. One of the club members called out, Razor, we don't need to learn karate. We do fine against drunk rednecks and weekend warriors. Razor cut him off. We do fine against drunk rednecks and weekend warriors, Razor cut him off. But this man just schooled me, made me look like an amateur, and I ain't ashamed to admit when someone knows more than I do. He looked back at Chuck. So what do you say? Would you teach us? Chuck considered this. This wasn't a typical request, teaching a motorcycle club, not exactly his usual demographic, but there was something in Razor's eyes, genuine curiosity, respect earned through experience. I teach at a school in Torrance. You're welcome to come by. Torrance is a long ride. Then you'll have to decide how serious you are. Razor grinned. Fair enough. What days? Tuesday and Thursday evenings, 6 to 8. We'll be there. Not all of us. Some of these guys are too stubborn. But me and a few others, yeah, we'll be there. Chuck nodded. One condition. Name it. You check your ego at the door. Rank, reputation, club colors, none of that matters in the dojo. Everyone starts as a student. Razor absorbed this. In biker culture, rank was everything. The hierarchy was sacred. But he just felt what real mastery looked like, and he wanted it. Deal. But the story doesn't end here. What happened over the next 6 months would create one of the most unlikely teacher-student relationships in martial arts history. True to his word, Razor showed up at Chuck's school the following Tuesday. He brought 3 others from his club, men who had watched the encounter at Joe's and wanted to understand what they'd seen. They arrived on their Harleys,
leather and denim and attitude. The other students at the school, mostly suburban families, young professionals, college kids, stared nervously. Bikers in a karate dojo. It was an odd sight. Chuck greeted them at the door. "You made it." "Said I would." "You'll need to change. No boots on the mat, no leather, just loose clothing." Razor looked at his vest, the patches, the symbols of his identity. "Can't train in our colors?" "Not on the mat. Everyone wears the same thing, gi or training clothes. That's the rule." For a moment, Razor's jaw tightened. Then he nodded. "Where do we change?" They trained for 2 hours that first night. Chuck started them with basics, stance, breathing, balance, things they thought they already knew, things they realized very quickly they didn't understand at all. Razor's size and strength meant nothing when he couldn't maintain proper structure. His intimidation tactics didn't work on principles of physics. His aggression became a liability when it threw him off balance. By the end of the session, all 4 bikers were exhausted, humbled, and fascinated. "This is harder than I thought," Razor admitted, wiping sweat from his face. "Because you're fighting your instincts. Unlearning bad habits takes longer than learning new techniques." "How long until I can do what you did at Joe's shop?" Chuck smiled slightly. "Years, maybe decades. Depends on how much you're willing to commit." "That long?" "That's if you're dedicated. Some people train their whole lives and never get it." Razor considered this. "But it's possible." "It's possible." "Then I'm in." Over the next 6 months, Razor and his crew became regular students. They didn't talk about it publicly, didn't advertise it to other clubs.
Years later, a documentary filmmaker would track down Vincent "Razor" Kane. His story about that August day would become one of the most cited examples of Chuck Norris's teaching philosophy. The interview happened in 1989, 14 years after the encounter at Joe's motorcycle repair. Razor was in his mid-40s by then, still involved with the Iron Cross, but in a different capacity. Less riding, more mentoring younger members. The filmmaker asked, "Is it true you challenged Chuck Norris to a fight?" Razor laughed. "Challenged is a polite word for it. I was running my mouth, trying to prove something. Thought I was the toughest guy around. Then he put me on the ground so fast I didn't even understand what happened." "Were you angry?" "At first, yeah. My ego was destroyed. But then, I don't know, something shifted. I realized I just encountered someone operating on a completely different level. Not just physically, mentally. He wasn't fighting me. He was redirecting me. That's different." "How so?" "Fighting is opposition. You against me. Force against force. What he did was more like water flowing around a rock. I was the rock. He was the water. And somehow the water won." "That changed your perspective?" "Changed everything. I'd spent 15 years building this identity as someone tough, someone to be feared. And in 90 seconds, this guy showed me that tough is relative. Real power isn't about intimidation. It's about control, about understanding principles that most people never learn." "Did you stay in touch?" "Trained with him for 5 years, 2 nights a week, never missed unless I was out of state. Best education I ever got. Not just in fighting, in living, in being a man who doesn't need to prove himself constantly." "What happened to your club?" "We're still around, smaller now, different focus. We do a lot of work with at-risk kids, teach them mechanics, discipline, respect. Some of them train in martial arts, others just need structure. But the violence, the territorial bullshit, that's mostly gone." "Because of Chuck?" "Because of what Chuck showed me was possible. You can be strong without being aggressive, confident without being arrogant, respected without being feared. That's the legacy he left with me." "Do you still see him?" "Occasionally. He's busy with films now, different projects. But when we connect, it's like no time has passed. He'll ask about the club, about my training, about whether I'm teaching. And I am now, teaching some of the younger guys. Not karate exactly, more like life skills through physical discipline, and I try to teach them the same lesson Chuck taught me, which is, Razor thought for a long moment, that the most dangerous person in the room isn't the loudest, the biggest, or the most aggressive. It's the quietest, the one who's already assessed the situation, understood all the variables, and made peace with whatever needs to happen. That's power, real power, and that's what I saw at Joe's shop that day.
The final piece of this story came from an unexpected source, Chuck Norris himself, in a 2004 interview about teaching philosophy. The interviewer asked, "What's your most memorable teaching experience?" Chuck smiled. "There have been many, but one that stands out involved a biker. Big guy, tough reputation, came at me with a lot of attitude, wanted to prove that his street experience beat my training. What happened? I showed him different, not to embarrass him, but to help him see there were things he didn't know, approaches he'd never considered. Did he learn? Became one of my most dedicated students, trained for years, eventually started teaching others. That's the goal, really, not to create copies of yourself, but to help people discover their own path." Do you remember his name? Vincent. Called himself Razor. Good man, once he got past his own ego. Still in touch occasionally. What did you learn from teaching him? Chuck paused, considering that everyone has potential, regardless of their background. Razor came from a world most people fear, biker culture, violence.